Welcome back to a Celtic state of mind. There we go. Another 2-2 draw for Celtic, this time against Legia Warsaw, in a game that was pulled together to celebrate the career of Artur Boruc, who we saw coming on about 90 seconds, in fact, not even 90 seconds before the end of the game, probably about 10 seconds before the end of the game. Became a bit of a sideshow when you were unhappy with the Celtic performance. I've got to say, as much as I loved Artur Boruc as a player during his 5 years at Celtic, I was more interested in our performance. People might say to me that it's only friendly, or this was all about Boruc. But to be honest with you, every game in the pre-season for me is all about preparation for the new season. So I'm looking at some points and I want your feedback. I want to spark up a bit of conversation and debate. First half versus the second half, is that a concern? Or is it down to the changes in personnel? If it is down to the changes in personnel, which I'm pretty sure it is, are you concerned at the depth of the squad and the quality drop-off in some of the positions? Throwing it out there, asking the question. Are you concerned at the amount of goals that we've lost in pre-season? Or are you basically saying, Paul, get on with it. It's all about preparation and fitness, getting the minutes in the legs, and don't concern yourself. I've got to look back a long time ago when Arsenal beat us 5-1 in 1987 in the pre-season, where I went to my first ever game in the Tommy Burns testimonial, which was a week later. And Liverpool beat us 1-0. Ronnie Whelan scored that day, 1987 in May. Arsenal humped us 5-1. We went on to win the double. Yeah, we did add a couple of additions to the squad after that particular game. But the reason I'm saying it is often, the games, you can't read too much into them. This time last season, we were getting taken to school really by a West Ham side. 6-2 they beat us, and I really was concerned at that stage. We had a goalkeeper who looked absolutely out of his depth at that point. We've moved on, we've developed, we've improved leaps and bounds, so I'm not going to get too concerned. But obviously, we need a few points to discuss. Graham Webster, you've come in to say not good. Tell me, what was your concerns? Tell me what you thought about the first half, because I thought we were superb in the first half. It should have been at least 4-0. It was 2-0. We threw that away. Stephen Sloan, you're coming back in. And you were talking at half-time about the quality of the Scottish game. What you're telling us now, 9 goals conceded in our last 4 games, 6 of those goals conceded in our second half. You wrote the script for me on this post-match, Stephen, it would appear. Only 2 victories in 5 games. Should we be concerned? Basically, that's my tagline. You wrote it for me, Stephen. Thank you very much. Should we be concerned, or should we be saying, you know what, we're not really that concerned about the results. It's all about getting the minutes in the legs. We will discuss that. Paddy, welcome back. Put simply, that second half performance was just not good enough from Celtic. I've heard quite a few people, both on social media and on the Acsom WhatsApp group, which can get a bit tasty at times, talking about the fact that there's a belief that we've maybe got 15 or 16 players that when they're on the park you're confident, but then when you drop to players out with that kind of bubble, the standard isn't the same. Possibly that is the case, and obviously we're changing complete teams at times at half time, so it should maybe be expected that there's going to be a drop off, that the rhythm is going to completely change. The quality has not been the same. Tonight is an example of that as well. Joe Porter, I love this positivity, Joe. We will go the entire league season unbeaten. Are we good enough to do that? Are we better than last season? Have we improved? I agree that we have improved, Joe. Going a league campaign unbeaten, obviously, we've done it before. It's a massive undertaking. But I do think we have improved. I think we've improved as a team. I made a few comments the other day about Aaron Moy. And none of them whatsoever were negative. They certainly were not meant to be negative, but sometimes online things can be perceived a certain way. I wasn't saying that he was there just to make up the numbers in the squad. I think that what we've done with the acquisitions of every player so far in this pre-season is we have improved. I think we've improved. So you look at the goalkeeper scenario. I'm not a big fan of Scott Bain. And I know we've spoken about reasons for keeping him. And going into a season, how many goalkeepers do you need in the first team squad? And obviously we've got a couple of goalies out on loan, Hazard and Barkas. Duhan has gone and signed for Tranmere. I think we expected that as well. But we've also got a scenario where we have Scott Bain, Siegrist, Joe Hart and Toby Uluwayemi. And there's maybe an argument to say that you need 4 goalkeepers going into the campaign, because obviously you can have goalkeeper crises. Is Scott Bain a competent number 2? Are you happy? Are you confident in him when he comes in? I've not really seen it. I know in the pre-season, I think there's been a save that he made, which was exceptional. But I've not seen it since he came to Celtic. So I think that the acquisition of Siegrist has improved that area of our squad. Bringing in Bernabe, I think, will improve that area of the squad. Although I'm going to throw this out, I still think Taylor's the first pick left back. Based on pre-season performances only, I think Ralston's got the jersey at right back. But, let's have a debate about that. Some of you might disagree. We've brought in the centre half that we required. We really needed a centre half to come in, and we did need a midfield player to come in. Whether or not he's the midfielder we were looking for in terms of physicality, even in terms of his specific area of the midfield, that's left to be seen. And obviously we've also discussed the fact that Carter Vickers and Jota were by no means givens, and the fact that we've done that business and we've brought them in I think is astute. I think it's astonishing that we've managed to do that. I've said before on Acsom that I expected one of them to come, not 2 of them. The fact we've done both deals, I think, is impressive, and I'm not going to overlook that. I think both players will actually improve in season 2 under Ange Postecoglou. But the acquisitions of Jens this week and Moy, I think, have been absolutely required. Do we need any more? That's a big question. I'm also going to ask you the question about some of these players who are maybe not within the top 15, 16. And I'm thinking about Julian and Mikey Johnston. And I'm also thinking about James McCarthy within that group. I'm not going to bring the young guys in like Lawal, etc., because I think that they're in a situation where they don't get criticism at this moment in time, because they're probably going to be involved in the B team next season in any case, and this is all about their experience of first team preparation and football, working with experienced pros. And I'm going to ask the question, the players I've mentioned, what are they bringing? What are they bringing to this squad? What are they bringing when they come on? Are they bringing enough? And if not, what do we do with them? Because we really have trimmed the squad over the period that Ange has been at Celtic. We really have trimmed the squad. But we can't trim it to such a degree that we don't have enough quality, and we're always asking for young kids to step up. We know from last season what an injury crisis looks like. Yeah, we know that one player, for example, Starfelt, drops out, and we're playing Stephen Welsh, and I don't think the same quality is there, although I thought Welsh played pretty well tonight. So what do you think about that as well? Keep the comments coming in. Teams in Scotland says, Joe, I love your positivity this evening. Teams in Scotland are terrified of playing us. Last season, how big was the gap? And I don't mean in terms of the points deficit, but what do you think the difference was in the gap? Ange Postecoglou came in, and we were a shambles, I felt, after the season before. And he had a massive job on his hands, and he did it. And he did it with style, did it with a bit of panache, of course, not only implementing a results-driven scenario with Celtic, but also a style, a philosophy. They were entertaining to watch. And in the first half tonight, I thought Celtic were entertaining to watch. That was all, Angie's style that we were watching there. But what was the gap? What do you think the gap was? And in terms of that, when you look at the pre-season and the business done by Celtic and others, do you think that gap has widened? Joe reckons we're going to go unbeaten, and the other teams in Scotland are terrified to play us. Do you agree with that? Do you think that is the case? Let me know. And here we go as well. The Killing Moon. Are you a fan of Echo and the Bunnymen? That is the first question. And you should be. Impressed with our movement and finishing. Slightly annoyed with our last two results. I make it 3 draws, 3 each, 2 each, and 2 each. And I think in all 3 games, we probably should have won. So if you're Ange Postecoglou, you're looking at the bigger picture here. Are you saying that, you don't want to get beat in pre-season? Of course you don't. You don't want to draw in pre-season. But in terms of the overall performances, not just the second halves of these games, we should be winning these games. And if we played our full strength team, we would win the games. I'm not, I'm not getting slack. I'm not getting lax on that. But I do believe that in all 3 games, the drop-offs due to us getting minutes in the legs of people who have not played a lot of football in the last year. What about then Ideguchi? Paul gone wrong. Gucci looked decent at points. In the second half, there are people in the WhatsApp group, the Acsom WhatsApp group, and I know you don't have access to that, who actually disagree. And they're questioning what he brings to the team. So please let me know what your thoughts are on Ideguchi. And bring in as many comments as you possibly can. Gary Doonan, always welcome. On the Acsom Bulletin. Our 2 best defenders in pre-season so far are academy players, Welsh and Ralston. What a point that is, by the way. I said tonight about Stephen Welsh being impressive. When he came into the Celtic side, I spoke to a youth coach who had watched with interest the development of Welsh at development level. And what he was saying to me, having watched them for about 6 months in the Celtic first team, 2 seasons ago, he told me that this is a player who at the academy level was head and shoulders above his contemporaries. The passing range that he had not yet been seen by the Celtic support at that point, of course. And he was one to watch. He was one to look out for. Did that, fashion my opinion of Stephen Welsh? Probably to a degree it did, because it gave me more of an overview of the player and how he had developed into the first teamer that we saw in Neil Lennon's last season. I think last year was very difficult for him, but there was a situation where in January we could have moved Stephen Welsh on. We mentioned the Italian interest in Scottish football, the amount of young players who are going over to Italian football and who are thriving has got to be said. And Udinese were interested in Stephen Welsh. I think it was really telling that Ange Postecoglou kept him. Now, the counter-argument to that might have been, well, we didn't have the players. But what I would say, if he didn't rate him, then he could have cashed in and then brought in what could be, I guess, defined as one of his own players, one of his own targets. But he kept him, and I think that showed that although Stephen Welsh wasn't playing regularly last season, Ange Postecoglou believed in him. And what this pre-season has shown, Gary, I feel, is that he is definitely the next in line behind Carter Vickers and Starfelt, because when we've required to replace Starfelt this pre-season, it's Stephen Welsh who's had that vote of confidence. He started the games. However, he has, Ange Postecoglou has brought in another centre-half in Maurice Jens, and it's to be seen, it's to be proven that whether or not he's going to be chosen over Stephen Welsh. I don't disagree with this comment at all. And I think that what's interesting about it as well, when you look at the right-back position in Tony Ralston, and I don't think there's a player who's been spoken about more than Ralston from the academy since Acsom started. Such has his journey been. The spectacular nature of it coming into the side last season. Is he, at the moment, our first choice right back? I'm going to throw that one right out there on the back of Gary's point. How do you decide? Because on paper, he shouldn't be. On paper, Juranovic is the first choice right back. But in terms of the actual performances in pre-season, if we base it on that, Taylor's the first choice. So I think that's a very interesting point. Let me know your thoughts on it. Scott Brotherton comes in to say that Juranovic has been off it in pre-season. Hope he's not had his head turned. Is that a concern? Because we know obviously that there was interest from Spanish football and probably elsewhere in Juranovic. It resulted in a couple of I think, concerning tweets from credible sources. And the first one that came out from Fabrizio Romano followed a podcast we actually did where we said we're not going to lose any of our big assets this summer. And it was the first time in 5 years that we weren't going to lose an asset. We did indeed lose assets in all of the previous 5 years. And it went back to a kind of wider discussion on the fact that if we were to keep a team together, and not just on the park, but Ange Postecoglou being part of this, if we were to keep that together for 4 or 5 years and build something, then it would be a bit of a change in tact in terms of what Celtic have done in the past, where there's been almost like a conveyor belt of talent coming in and out, as well as a manager, and the lifespan of a manager maybe being about 3 years. You might think that that's the best time, lifespan for a manager to be at Celtic. Certainly in modern football, it seems to be the norm. But we were talking about keeping this core team together and keeping Ange at the helm for longer than 3 years, and to see if whether or not that would make a difference in terms of our development on a European stage as well. And obviously Juranovic was the one who was in the gossip columns and on the blogs and on the mainstream news channels to say that he was the guy that was going to be leaving. It doesn't look like he has been. Has it affected him? Let's hope it hasn't. John Sweeney, thanks for coming on to the show. You're welcome back. Well, when you take Hatate and O'Reilly out the midfield, the drop-off is frightening, and some fringe players are not good enough. And I think that goes into the discussion we were talking about. Out with that core group of 15 to 16, when you start bringing in some of the players who might be deemed third-choice players, is the quality good enough? I mean, I think that the task that Ange Postecoglou had when he comes in is massive. And what we're now trying to do, I think, is, and I don't like calling players dead wood, but, players that were not contributing, I think we've got rid of a lot of those types of players, both in terms of the loan market and also in permanent deals. I was surprised at some of them. I was surprised we got a club who were prepared to buy Bolingoli. But we did, so fair play to the people behind the scenes who are working round the clock, I'm sure, during this transfer window. But I do agree, John, that some of the drop-off is a wee bit concerning. But we've got to ask the question, how many players do we bring in? Ange spoke about a week ago, maybe not even as long as that. Actually, it was after the Blackburn game. We're going to bring in 2 more players, and we did. But he has obviously said previously that if a player presented themselves, and I don't mean personally, but if an agent was to present an opportunity to sign a player, and Ange thinks that it would be for the betterment of the squad and the depth, then he would be able to bring them in. And I think that was a scenario with the player you mentioned there, one of the players you mentioned, Matt O'Reilly, where that deal was presented to Celtic and Celtic took up the option. And, when you look at what was spent in this pre-season, about 18 million quid, I think there is still wiggle room. I really do, for Ange. If something is presented and he thinks it's going to improve our squad, then he'll go for it. Who knew that Matt O'Reilly would be a first pick in January? Who knew that? How many of us knew that? I don't think many of us would have known the absolute quality of that player. So it's going to be interesting. Joe Fulham, we need to eradicate giving away goals straight away from kickoffs. Here's a player who probably got the least amount of criticism on a Celtic state of mind last season, Cameron Carter-Vickers. And we were calling for Celtic to move heaven and earth to bring him in permanently. The fact that we did gave lots of celebration in this studio and further afield, and rightly so. Superb signing. But he's been caught napping a couple of times. Is that because he's still getting up to speed? If so, not a problem. These games will be forgotten about quickly enough once a competitive action starts. But I agree with you, Joe. We need to stop giving the goals away straight from kickoffs. And I know tonight's goal wasn't the one that Carter-Vickers was to blame for. It was the equaliser. However, he's been to blame for a couple in the pre-season. Now, we're bringing in Shire Scott. By the way, if I do bring up a comment and quickly remove it, it's because quite frankly, my eyesight is dreadful. And if there's something on there that shouldn't be on the screen, I will remove it as soon as I possibly can. Shire Scott, such a dampener with that second half performance, and Scoreline just shows the lack of quality in terms of our squad depth. Do you agree with that? Do you think that's a concern once we get into the business end of the season? Aero 250, welcome back to a Celtic state of mind. First half was what I wanted to see. The second half was pretty poor. Our first 11 are great to watch though, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think there's another 4 or 5 players on top of that if they come into the fray, you've got absolutely no concerns about the team, the drop-off, the tempo changing. I don't think that there are concerns with a lot of those players. But then, in this scenario with the pre-season games, once you get to that third choice, it could be the third choice players that maybe aren't good enough to maintain those levels. Daniel Brown, if I can bring this one up as well. Surely time to accept it's best to get Johnston McCarthy off the wage bill and bring in a couple of players that can bring value to the squad. Time and time again, we've heard about last chance saloons when it comes to Johnston. My take on him as a player is that he's a very talented player, but there came a point in his development at Celtic where not only in terms of his ability, but his physicality, he had to go off and do a Ryan Christie, didn't he? He had to go off, play a lot of football, put on a lot of muscle, change his regime and become more of a physical player. You look at the sulkiness of Jota. Let's use Jota as an example, because he's the player that Mikey Johnston has to displace in this team. How far away is Mikey Johnston from getting a game ahead of Jota? I would suggest miles, light years away from it. So the one thing he can improve on, Johnston, is his physicality. And I know Colin Watt has told us that he shared on his social media channels, has Johnston, probably Instagram because I've not seen it and I'm not on the gram, as they say, is that Johnston has been working on it. But you know what? I think it's too late in the day. I think it should have been done. I think we were talking about Johnston in the same kind of light this time last year. Ryan Christie went away on loan. He came into Celtic as a skinny kid with bags and bags of potential. He was given his debut for Inverness, Caley Thistle, by John Hughes, ex-Celt. And he developed into a player that was much sought after in Scottish football. Celtic buy him, loan him right back to Inverness. He comes back to Celtic, not in the plan, so we put him out to Aberdeen. And when he was at Aberdeen, there was a development not only in the player, but in the physicality of that player. And I don't think that Mikey Johnston has done that. Another player that I have likened him to, who didn't do it whilst at Celtic, was Lewis Morgan. But what Lewis Morgan did is he went away and he travelled away to the MLS, and he has, for me, proved himself as the player that we thought he could have been when we bought him from St Mirren. Is that the kind of move that Mikey Johnston needs? I think it probably is. James McCarthy, a player who I long admired prior to him signing for Celtic. I can understand why we bought him at the time that we did, because we had lost such an amount of experience that we needed a bit of experience in the side, in the squad. Joe Hart comes in, James McCarthy comes in. Eyebrows were raised at the length of his deal because of his age and his injury concerns, the fact he had been without a club for a while. But a year on, what have we learned about James McCarthy? Is he bringing value to the squad? What's your thoughts? Daniel Brown doesn't think so. Let me know what you think. Edward Y of Oz got caught out, counter-attack. Gucci should learn how to take on his man. Is he that type of player? Does he take on a man? And again, Paddy Lavery, you're talking about Mr. Boric. So good on you for making that observation. What did you think of Arthur Boric? This was his swan song this evening. We talk about Celtic, we talk about the performances, we talk about getting ready for the big game on the 31st against Aberdeen, the curtain raiser. These games, you see, this has been the issue. We're not ready yet. We've not got to the point where we're ready yet. We've also not got to the point where we've seen our first team playing 90 minutes. And that's to be expected, okay? But we're in a position where normally we are, preparing for a game, a qualifier, much sooner than the first league game of the season. And we're normally going into those games not ready. So that's why I'm not getting too concerned. But I think all your points are valid. I'm not just brushing them under the rug. I think they're all valid. I think we do need to look at some of these points. But at the same time, I'm not getting overly concerned. I think if you look at the bigger picture of the squad, there's still tweaks to be done. There's still tweaks to be had. McCarthy comes into games. He always looks ultra committed to the cause, no matter what period of the game he comes in. But I don't know how much of an impact he's made. I really don't. I remember the Wraith Rovers game where we saw the return of Julien, and he made a pass in that game which was astonishingly good, despite the lower league opposition. I remember a game against Dundee United, the one each game, where he was performing really well until Fuchs took him out. And I think there was a bit of a turning point there because I've not seen a huge impact by him since he came in. Now, John Sweeney comes in to say Bain, McCarthy and Johnson shouldn't see first team action unless we have an injury crisis. Now, there are players that have been loaned out in McCarthy and Scales who have been loaned out for development. But what do you do with players like Bain and McCarthy? Did I say McCarthy? I meant Scales. So Scales and Montgomery, have been loaned out for development. What do you do with players like Bain and McCarthy? You can't loan them out for development. So you're probably looking to get them off the wage bill and moved on. If you do, is the squad too thin? That's a big question. Colin Watt pointed out that in terms of Scottish-born players to meet that quota, we might keep James McCarthy. I think that all depends on the wage that he's on and how much he's contributing as well, because obviously once you announce your European squad, you can have a Scottish-born player in that squad, and the likelihood of them playing is slim to none. Andrew. I missed the last 20. What was the score? I've got the sound down. The score was 2-2. Not a disaster by any manner of means, but when you compare the second half performance to the first, there was a huge drop off. But the caveat, which is another favourite Acsom word, is that we changed a lot of the personnel, and that was probably the reason for that. When it comes to Arthur Boruc, remember we were talking about him being a cult hero, the definition of a cult hero, and obviously that filtered into the Celtic TV discussion as well, who were also talking about it. Is that what you look on him as? Do you look on Arthur Boruc as a cult hero? 2006, says Gary Doohan, a Man U second team beat us 3-0 at Celtic Park. 3 months later, we beat their top team 1-0 to qualify for the last 16 of the Champions League. We absolutely did. That was a really disappointing performance, the 3-0 game. If I remember correctly, was that the game, Gary, and you'll know this off the top of your head without checking the Celtic wiki, was that the game where we brought on Ben Hutchison as a sub? I think it might have been. And Gordon Strachan talks about his lack of options off the bench that particular evening. Daniel Mack, Arthur Boruc, King of the Holy Cross. There you go. Second half was terrible, says Big Bruce. I felt the same. I'm not getting overly concerned, but the second half was particularly poor. This is something you don't see very often. Cameron Carter-Vickers was bullied off the ball for that goal too easily. Egyptian King, he was bullied off the ball. I think he was off balance. Can I play devil's advocate on this one? I've already had a wee dig at Cameron Carter-Vickers. We didn't really have much to criticise last season on the big fella. He was the star man last year. He was brilliant. And when we announced his signing, I was delighted because I expected us to get Jota. And I expected Cameron Carter-Vickers to have another pop at the English game. And I'm pretty sure there was interest there as well. So I love the big man. I thought he was absolutely superb last season. I think he's maybe a wee bit away in terms of his sharpness so far. And I don't think, Egyptian King, I don't think he's going to get bullied much this season. Even if he was bullied off that particular ball. Aero 250 thinks that Julian looks assured. We have asked time and time again, where are we with Julian? Someone said in the comment section of the YouTube channel that I'm obsessed with this Instagram post. I'm not. And if I was obsessed, I'd have Instagram. I have mentioned the post a time or two. And the reason I've mentioned it is because it's all about, someone mentioned earlier about Juranovic having his head turned. It's all about having your head in the game. It's all about checking out, if you like. And there's been players in the past who only admit after they've left that their head was turned from interest by X, Y and Z. And I hope that's not the case with Juranovic. I also hope it's not the case with Julian, because if he remains at the club and he doesn't get a deal between now and the end of the transfer window, then you want him to look assured. You want him to play games. You want him to be able to step in and perform as well as possible. Perform as well as we know he can prior to the injury. The £7 million player that scored against Lazio, who scored and won the League Cup against Rangers. That's a player that we know he can be Euro 250. So hopefully he can look assured in a Celtic jersey. I've got to thank everybody for getting involved. Last couple of games on the match day, I've done it myself. And it's a wee bit different. But I'll tell you what, there's always enough input from you guys and girls in the comments section to keep me going and to get my mouth dry. So I need loads of refreshments if I do it myself. But this Saturday against Norwich, you will have a couple of other faces in Jared Hill and Lawrence Conley, and perhaps one or two others, as we collaborate with our friends at Celtics Down Under, and we do the match day against Norwich on a dual stream. We'll go live on Twitter on their live stream. We'll go live on YouTube on our live stream. How about that? And you can listen to Jared, who I absolutely love, and he'll get an opportunity as well to talk about his countryman, Aaron Moy, and he can tell us all about him. But thank you everybody for getting involved. If you want to support the channel, we never asked for you to pay for content, but if you want to buy some merchandise, there's a link, I think, underneath the video. Get involved in that. If you're in the Edinburgh area and you're not going to the game, come up to St James's Quarter, because we are finally launching a State of Mind up there. A State of Mind being the studio we work out of, which produces video content for various other aspects, such as football, music, culture, art, film, etc. Come up and see us. Quite a few of us will be up there, and we have a full day of entertainment. So Big Bems is going to be there as well. He's going to be DJing for us. We've got acoustic sessions from a number of artists who we've got to know from coming into the studio. We've got Q&As with Aidan Martin, who's got an incredible story to tell. He's an author, fantastic author at that, with the cast and crew of Irvine Welsh's Porno. So on the poster it says Irvine Welsh's Porno. If you don't know what that is, you might not want to come along. If you do know what it is, come along. And you can hear me chatting to Scott Kyle and Simon Weir and David Caswell. It's going to be a great day. We're going to be up there from 10 until 7. It's going to be a long day, but very enjoyable. Come up and meet us. Some of the actual listeners and the viewers of Acsom are already coming up. Some of them will also have merchandise available. And all the funds that we make on anybody's merchandise goes straight to the artists we're supporting. Artists, be that music, authors, artists, musicians, etc. So there we go. Come up and see us. You're just a person, John. Come up and see us in St James's Quarter, and there'll be refreshments up there as well. We can't give you bevy, but we can give you some refreshments, and it won't cost you £3.13 for a pie. Thank you everybody for getting involved, and we will see you on Saturday. Thanks for joining me once again on A Celtic State of Mind.